G'day Bomber fans, it was injury carnage in the AFL on Dreamtime, which of course means that we now turn to the VFL to see who replaces the injured players. Kyle Langford has done a quad, Zach Reid has done a hamstring. We need to bring in 2 new players, so we've got to talk about the candidates. Here's a recap of every AFL listed player in the VFL last night. Parish, Johnson, Vigo, Shiel. And before we get in, I'm just going to briefly summarise the game. It was a shocker. It was one of the windiest games you'll watch all year. Conditions were horrendous. Ball use was poor because of it. We ended up losing to a much better Tigers outfit. 22 points, it probably should have been more. But yeah, horrible conditions. Pretty average game to watch, but it doesn't mean there weren't some good performances in there, so let's get into it. Starting with probably the big one, Darcy Parish. It is just great to see him return. It has been a shocking week of injuries for the club, but it is just good to see Parish back playing footy for the first time since last year, and that's any footy. He's had such an interrupted preseason, so to see him out there running about is all we need. Also seeing him a class above really helps. I was thinking that we'd probably need to wait weeks until we see him integrated back into the AFL. That's me personally, but there is less he has to do than others that return from layoffs that long after seeing how good he was. His hands were really clean. His judgment in the conditions were good, despite them being so foreign to regular AFL players. These weren't AFL conditions, and I thought his presence in the contest was clearly that of an AFL player. He only really played the 3 quarters, but ended with 25 touches and 7 clearances, so yeah, good to see. And the thing is, right, he was in line to return to the VFL a couple of weeks back, I believe, or last week, when we had our bye, so he's not really being rushed back into anything right now. This approach to playing has been cautionary, and he did seem very fit, taken off late to preserve his body. That was always the plan, but he looks good. He's moving well. I don't know if he plays against the Lions. That might be a bit reactionary with a 5-day break, but if not against the Lions, he'll be back the following week in the AFL. He's going to be back in that side pretty soon, and that's a good thing. He looked good. Elijah Tsatas, I think that game kind of showed us the best and worst of him a bit. His ball winning ability is just nuts. He gathered 32 touches, 8 clearances, 16 contested possessions. But yeah, it was one of those games where you check the stats and realise, how involved he is. I don't know, I just don't think he was really doing that much with the ball. You can pin it down to poor ball use, but I think it's confidence. He just doesn't want to kick the footy anymore. He finds the ball so well. His footy IQ in a stoppage is next level, but then he doesn't know what to do with it and has to pass the responsibility off to someone else. That's the way I see it. I get that some would say, that's his role. He is the feeder, not the user. And I agree to an extent. I think he's a player who's, usually going to have a fair bit more hand passes than kicks. But there were too many times last night where we just needed territory, needed to throw it on the boot or take an extra second to think through a situation, be a bit more composed. And he, gave that responsibility to someone else, maybe when he shouldn't have. He doesn't really want to make him, he doesn't want to have the moment. He doesn't seem to really have any damage by foot right now, and I think it's all mental. I should say he wasn't bad. He was doing plenty for us inside the guts, but it was very much a good VFL performance, I felt, and it wasn't that pick-me AFL game. I don't think he plays against Brisbane off the back of that. You could argue his last game against Sydney, you could argue that was a pick-me performance, but I don't think this was. He needed to be a little bit more damaging with the footy he was winning, or at least, a bit smarter. But again, tough in these conditions, can't be too mad at that. But yeah, we're starting to see a few of these issues mount. Dylan Shiel, that was not a pick-me performance. That was just, really unfortunate. This is a very curious one, or interesting one, because Dylan Shiel to start the year, well, not to start, but when he was moved into the guts in the AFL, he looked unreal. He was probably one of our best players for 2 or 3 weeks. We were all talking about how good he was and how important he was to the team. Then he gets managed for 1 week, not dropped, but managed. When he comes back, it's as the sub, back-to-back sub performances. That's tough. Gets dropped to the VFL, and then, we see a really shaky and down Dylan Shiel last night. It was just a brutal night for him. Because based on his form for the season, he probably shouldn't be at this level. I think if we're not in a rebuild, he'd be back in the AFL. But, now that he's playing in the Rezzies, he's not looking comfortable. And I really do think this is, a case of Shiel probably being better off in the AFL. I think if he plays against Richmond on Dreamtime, he's probably better than if he played against the VFL Richmond last night. He was not suited to the game at all. I think the VFL this weekend was tougher than the AFL. His ball use was horrible at times. He just looked a bloke not comfortable with the game. It was probably the worst I've seen him play in a long time. Yeah, I guess we got to hope that's a one-off poor game, because more of that, and it's tough to see him forcing his way back into the team. He finished the night with 21 touches, a couple good, plenty of them not so good. Kayle Gerreyn, look, if the conditions were bad for Dylan Shiel, it was 10 times worse for a key forward. This was just a horrible night for him. You can tell how frustrated he was. I thought Shiel looked frustrated, but Gerreyn was so clearly frustrated when things weren't going his way. He just wasn't able to get anything going. I really liked his intent. He clearly gave it a crack, and that is good, because, if I was in that situation, I would have dropped my head and, done something else. But he really struggled to read the ball in that wind. He didn't register a mark for the night, I don't think. Had some pretty bad moments when using the ball. Just couldn't get anything going. And I think that's probably a good thing, in the grand scheme of things, because I reckon if he came in and started bagging goals, there would be talk of a debut and people would be hot on that and expecting him to be in that team, which would raise expectations for him. And I think it's probably better that we just see him continue to develop through the VFL. I've said that all year. I think, rather than throw him in, we should probably find ways around the injuries and change our structure. One, because I think it's valuable to plan for that in the future, but, two, I just don't think he's really ready to play. And games like this prove it. I know the conditions were horrendous, but you could see real frustration and, I guess, immaturity in his energy. That's very much, the energy of a kid still developing this early into his career. Nothing wrong with that. He was due a down game. He was in a fantastic run of form before this. Good learning experience, I think. Jye Menzie, he was busy early, but just didn't really stay involved for all 4 quarters, and I think that was kind of the story for a lot of our smaller players. This is just another bloke who, he probably would have played better footy in the AFL. Sometimes VFL is just harder to get going in. And for Menzie, he didn't really do too much. He had some good pressure-based moments, a few nice tackles, sat himself in D50 at times to help us defend, but he won't be returning to the AFL team off the back of that. He's out of form at the moment, actually. Hopefully he finds his touch again, because he was very good to start the year, not just in the VFL, but in the AFL. Alwyn Davey Jnr, he actually has less touches the same amount of touches as Jye Menzie, 10 disposals for the night. But I at least thought he was really having an impact with some of those touches. He kicks the one goal, a very opportunistic goal. One behind, which would have been an incredible major if he nailed it. He kind of sold the dummy on the mark and went from about 50 and narrowly missed. He's really someone you want touching the footy more than he does. Even if he had 15 touches, he probably would have been one of our better players on the night. He set up two or three other goals as well directly. But in the end, he was just someone who played in patches, and in other patches, he just wasn't a big part of the game. I think he needs to be aiming for accumulation a bit more now, not even for selfish reasons, because if he does have the footy 5 to 10 more times a game, it is helping the team. He does good things with it, but he's not getting his hands on it enough. Luamon Lual, similar vibes actually, another with 10 touches, 3 in a row, but I really thought Luamon at times was providing us good energy. He's another one who plays in patches. I feel like when he has one touch, he gets another shortly after, and he's, his disposals are very staggered. He thrives off being involved, you could say. So when he is involved, he actually looks good. That mark to nail his goal was really clever. Then at other times, though, he just blows the chance. He blows chances he shouldn't be blowing. There was a play late in the game where he had about 4 options going inside 50 and fluffed it for us. I think, again, like with Davey, if he's finding himself in the game a few more times, it is probably a good thing. But in conditions like that, you really have to be an elite wingman to be able to read the ball. The wind is horrible. He was doing a lot of chasing. So was everyone else. Conditions didn't help him. I thought he was okay at times. Rhys Unwin, probably his best game for us in a few weeks. I know he didn't get his feet to the ball much, which is disappointing because he's a very clever short kick. That could have been pretty valuable with a ball that hangs in distance. Sometimes it is better to go short. Despite that, I thought his link work was really good. His lateral movement and then quick release was pretty eye-catching at times. He showed good signs in the contest, but also at times he was just looking like a kid, a bit skinny. He tried and shrug a tackle, but bigger men would just have the upper hand. So that's a learning curve, how he deals with a slender frame. But I noticed some good things that he was doing. There were parts of his game that I thought took a step forward last night, and there were others that didn't really, or they're not crucial to be developed right away. Like I say every week, he has time. Vigo Visentini, I don't know about you guys, but it did seem like he was playing a bit for a debut, possibly. I think I tweeted out at quarter time that he was really giving it a red hot crack. There was one chase down early in the game where he was running so hard he literally fell over. That's cartoon stuff. And then there was another more successful one late in the game where he provided just an awesome, almost inspirational chase down on a smaller forward and forced a turnover. It was great. It was probably the best moment of the night for the Bombers. And it was effort that we haven't really had in our team from a big man, under Goldie. And that's not me talking down Goldie's efforts. I've loved what he's given us. He's the better ruckman of the two. But Vigo looks like he's moving really well around the field now. I don't know if a debut is the right thing just yet because, could be swayed both ways. But yeah, I mean, he's kind of still halving the contest against rucks that would get demolished in the AFL. I don't remember the name of the Richmond ruck, but it was pretty tight in the battle. If that's Goldie, it's probably pretty comprehensive. If Vigo was to go up against McInerney or someone, it would not be pretty, I think. But at least he's making us think about the option of resting Goldie. That is fun. Maybe next time there's an injury or an opening from another team, Vigo's in, or maybe it's a dual ruck setup with Goldie and Vigo. I mean, I don't know how that would work with our structure up forward, but I think that's probably the best way to integrate him into the team and to get him familiar with the AFL, because I don't think he'd be able to ruck against proper AFL rucks on his own. Zak Johnson, really mature game from Zak. He was nowhere in the first quarter. I was worried because it was he's obviously playing for a debut, and he had 2 touches, I think. But then he really fought his way back into the game. He kind of willed his way back in. He started injecting run and direct ball movement from the back half. He was going for the handball receive for so many uncontested marks that we had, even though we didn't have many uncontested marks. He was constantly being used to be that kicker in a chain. His role was really important, which is great for someone so young, because, we really didn't have any ball movement going, and when he started playing better, you felt like there was a little bit of a shift. And I think the fact that he stood up and ended the game as one of our best players, 27 touches, going at over 80% in those conditions, while, trying to move the ball up the field. I think he's ready. The only reason he didn't make his debut sooner is because that VFL bye. It meant that this was his first game of footy in 3 weeks, because he was also the carryover emergency for the Swans game, which I guess shows how close he was to playing. But yeah, the way this guy was moving around and how important he made himself, that smother late in the game, I think he can happily say he's ready to play footy now. I thought he needed time to start the year. I wasn't surprised that Day Wicks played before him, but now he is... he's probably going to be our next debutant, and I wouldn't be surprised if he plays against Brisbane. He's very close. And finally, Saad El-Hawli, just really disappointing news. So he was probably, one of the players in line to return to the AFL side, given all those injuries. I saw him come off, I saw that he wasn't on the field, and I thought maybe we were resting him for the AFL. It turns out he's joined the, Reid and Langford on the sidelines, potentially. He went off with hamstring awareness or tightness, which, as we know now from Zach Reid, that doesn't mean he hasn't done any damage. So he's going to have to now have scans as well. Hopefully it is just tightness and he won't miss weeks. But yeah, just, another injury that piles onto a pretty shocking weekend for the club. You can't really write this stuff. And there were also some others in the VFL. Cam Nyko did his hamstring. He's a mid-season draft hopeful, so that's really disappointing. Yeah, just a cursed club. That wasn't even on the hanger. That was a different stadium. So really bad weekend for the club, with 3 players going down, 3 AFL listed players going down right before the mid-season draft. But that is that. Recap done. Plenty going on. We've got players to replace next week, and I think we've seen a few of them at this level. Maybe another debutant. That is definitely possible. Zak Johnson has to be one to watch now. But yeah, that is all. Cheers for watching. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and go Bombers.